Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It is Friday night in Trump's America, which once again means we've had an absolutely incredible flurry of late-breaking stories, including the unexpected sudden resignation of the #3 person at the Department of Justice. Rachel Brand would, of course, be the person who would oversee the Mueller probe if Rod Rosenstein were to be removed. Tonight, she has announced her resignation. Also tonight, within just the last hour, within 20 minutes, in fact, President Trump announcing he will not approve the release of that Democratic memo, a response to the infamous Devin Nunes memo last week. But just moments ago, right before we came on air, Washington Post reporting another sudden resignation of another White House official amid allegations of spousal abuse. And in case there was any doubt about how it happened to begin with, that a man accused Rob Porter of abusing his two ex-wives who reported their stories to the FBI and shared documentation of what they say he did to them, was allowed to continue working at the highest levels of the White House. Today, the President of the United States made it very clear. He made it clear who he believes, how he views domestic violence, and how the culture of this White House, set at the very top, encouraged Rob Porter to stay on the job until the press forced his hand. Because these were the president's first public comments on Porter's departure.
Well, we wish him well. He worked very hard. I found out about it recently, and I was surprised by it. But we certainly wish him well. It's a obviously tough time for him. He did a very good job when he was in the White House. And we hope he has a wonderful career, and hopefully he will have a great career ahead of him. But it was very sad when we heard about it, and certainly he's also very sad. Now, he also, as you probably know, he says he's innocent, and I think you have to remember that. He said very strongly yesterday that he's innocent. So you'll have to talk to him about that, but we absolutely wish him well. Did a very good job while he was at the White House.
You will note probably that there was absolutely zero mention of the two women who say Rob Porter terrorized them while they were married, whom he allegedly kicked and punched in the face and berated endlessly, who in one case had to obtain an emergency protective order to escape his abuse, and whose lives were upended by what he put them through.
By the end of about 3 years of marriage, I was sort of a shell of a person, and a muted version of the woman that I had been when I met Rob.
The President of the United States couldn't even bring himself to go through the motions of condemning domestic violence in the abstract. As we saw with the white nationalist murder in Charlottesville, this president cannot bring himself to denounce an obvious and flagrant evil standing there in front of his eyes, when to do so would defy his own interests and inclinations. And the more we learn about what his staff knew about Porter and when they found out, the clearer it becomes that they take this issue just as seriously as the president does. Today, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly told reporters he first learned about the extent of the allegations Tuesday night.
Clarified to us exactly, there's been a lot of reporting about the timeline and when you found out about things. Can you just verify that?
Tuesday night.
You found Tuesday night?
That the accusations were true. Yeah. 40 minutes later, he was gone.
Tuesday night, found out the accusations were true. 40 minutes later, he was gone. Now, that echoes the story that Kelly directed senior staff to adopt in a meeting this morning, according to the Washington Post, telling those in attendance to say he took action to remove Porter within 40 minutes of learning the abuse allegations were credible. But with hours of that meeting, staff were already leaking to the Post that Kelly's account was false, which is plainly and painfully obvious from the public record that anyone can examine. Because on Tuesday night, when Kelly says he first found out the accusations were true, he put out a statement defending Rob Porter. He called him a man of true integrity and honor, a friend, a confidant, and a trusted professional. And then the next morning, after photos were published of Porter's first wife with a black eye, White House officials told the Post that Kelly was still standing by Porter. In fact, was urging him to stay in the job. We also know from multiple reports that senior Trump aides have known for months about the allegations against Porter, including White House counsel Don McGahn, who was first alerted over a year ago, and Kelly himself, who learned last fall that the allegations were holding up Porter's security clearance. Today, Kelly explained that he wasn't told the details.
You had
some indication, right? Last year about the nature.
In November, I got an update on some of the investigations, and the update was that there was some things that needed to be looked into. Literally, that was it.
It's a little hard to square that claim with a report from Politico that Kelly was told several weeks ago that the FBI would recommend denying full security clearances to multiple White House aides, including Porter. At that senior staff meeting this morning, according to the Washington Post, the chief of staff also told subordinates to convey to other White House aides he cares about domestic violence. And then moments ago, Washington Post breaking the story that a second White House aide has resigned because of allegations of domestic abuse, which he denies. Late tonight, a breaking report, the president is privately questioning the credibility of Rob Porter's accusers. I'm joined now by one of the authors of that report, Aswin Subsang, politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Tell me about what you found in your reporting today.
Well, what my colleagues at the Daily Beast, Sam Stein, Lachlan Marquet, and I have found is that over the past couple of days, the President of the United States has been privately raising questions to both aides and longtime friends and confidants about the credibility of the allegations against Mr. Porter. He has been repeatedly asking if there are any reasons that people have uncovered as to why these women could be lying about this. So this is a president who is clearly not ready to accept, both privately and publicly, that his former staff secretary could be capable of these credible allegations leveled against him.
Or he's an individual who doesn't believe, he believes that women are liars.
Well, that was certainly the case. Look, it's the standard operating procedure of not just the president, but of the Trump White House in situations like this. The president of the United States took the exact same playbook and ran with it when it came to former Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore. He took the same playbook when it came to Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, Mike Tyson, many years before he became president when it came to sexual assault allegations. And the standing position, the official position of the Trump White House is that all the women, many of them, who are accusing the current sitting president of sexual misconduct are themselves all lying.
Yeah.
So the sad thing is this is all par for the course. There's nothing particularly surprising about any of this.
I just want to sort of highlight something important here, I think, because it's very important in what you mentioned. In the case of Roy Moore, there was identical reporting that he was privately saying he thought the women were lying. In this case, we have him privately, not that just publicly out of necessity he has to say, well, they're lying because it's a sort of PR defense, but genuinely believes that Roy Moore, who is credibly accused, of course, of molesting a child when he was a district attorney and multiple women coming forward, in this case, two different women independently, abuse allegations, documentation, a restraining order.
On the record.
On the record, calls to 911, telling the FBI, furnishing them photos of a black eye, all of that is fabricated and made up.
We have not heard via our reporting that the president has been saying that they have been fabricating, just that he is finding plenty of substantive reason, at least in President Trump's eyes, to cast doubt on it, or at least question the veracity or the credibility of these allegations. And look, like whatever he is private to aides and confidants, it's literally the easiest thing in the world to come out and say publicly, as he should have said this morning or yesterday or whenever, that domestic abuse is bad and that we take these allegations of spousal abuse very seriously.
Yeah, it was a notable absence in both John Kelly's statement and the president's statement, just any pro forma condemnation. Quickly and finally, word just late breaking that this speechwriter has resigned amidst allegations of domestic abuse. Do we know anything about that? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I've actually been trying to gather information in this seat as it's been breaking, and all that we've received from the White House so far, and again, we're still trying to confirm information about this, is that A, this position did not require a security clearance, and B, that the background check was ongoing. Now, we still have a lot of double and triple checking to do with that. It feels like there's another shoe or two to drop on this.
I think that's a good instinct.
Yeah.
Aswin Subsang, thanks for your great reporting.
Thank you.
Donna Edwards, a former Democratic Congresswoman, former executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and Michelle Goldberg's an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. I mean, I think the president and John Kelly, I think, have genuinely and honestly and earnestly revealed who they are and what their feelings are about this matter this week.
Right, and I think John Kelly in particular can almost be forgiven for not understanding what the big deal was with a high-level aide who smacks his wife around, because this administration has been full of people like that. You know, Steve Bannon is someone else who had very credible accusations of domestic violence against his second wife, although they were dismissed when she didn't show up to testify against him, and there was reporting that he...
restraining order.
And there was reporting that Trump nicknamed him Bam Bam in response, which tells you a lot about how Trump sees the seriousness of domestic violence.
Based on that allegation,
yes,
jokingly,
yeah, Bam Bam, ha ha, smacks his wife around. You know, Trump himself, Ivana Trump, in their divorce, in a deposition gotten by one of Trump's biographers, said that, you know, I think that what's gotten attention is that she said he raped her, but she also talked about him throwing her down on the bed in a rage and ripping out handfuls of her hair. Pudzer, Trump's first appointee for labor secretary, had to resign when it turned out that his wife had been on Oprah in disguise and anonymously it was an episode, I think it was high-class battered women. And although Pudzer then, you know, his nomination was torpedoed, there's been reporting that they're looking to find a way to bring him back in a role that doesn't require Senate confirmation. Right, so these are men who... This is not considered particularly outrageous in the milieu in which this president lives.
I have to say, Don, I was thinking about you, and I know you worked in domestic violence, and to watch the president say that today, we feel sorry for him, it felt like a real, I mean, smack in the face, I guess is what I want to say, to people that work in this field, to survivors of this, and to 40 years of work, to say that this kind of thing isn't just some private matter that you just scoff off.
Well, this is exactly why it is so difficult for women to come forward, because they know that they will be met with this kind of denial, propping up the abuser, describing him as nice to them, and so therefore it means that he could not possibly have committed violence. And, you know, I mean, when you look at Porter's behavior, it's one woman and then another woman and then apparently a girlfriend. I wouldn't be surprised if there were more, because it's a pattern of abusive behavior that is learned behavior, and he picks and chooses his victims. Clearly, he didn't go to the White House and beat up everybody there. He beat up women that he knew and that he had a relationship with. And so, you know, I guess I'm not surprised anymore by the White House's response. I mean, the president's response to me was reminiscent, of course, of Roy Moore, but also of Charlottesville. You know, both sides, you know, and really covering for Porter. And I think at his heart, because the president has been accused of very similar behavior himself. I mean, let's not forget the 12 women who've accused him of harassment and assault, that he can't possibly take the side and understand the plight of women who are trying to survive domestic violence. And the White House is filled with them. And so it's actually wasn't even a shock to me to hear this story. What's really shocking is Don McGahn and Chief of Staff Kelly sat on this information clearly for months and months and months, and allowed Porter to have access to our most secret documents and to continue to work in the White House. And frankly, had he not been found out, he'd still be there.
That 100% is clear. In Kelly's case, I mean, this nugget I thought was interesting, that he appeared as a character witness in 2016 court-martial of a Marine colonel accused of sexually harassing 2 female subordinates. He praised the colonel as a superb Marine officer. Kelly, right now, there's conflicting reporting about him offering to resign, being under the gun. But right now, I just want to be clear, he is lying. There's no other word to describe it. I try to be charitable in my interpretation and deployment of that word. He's lying in a bold-faced, plain, obvious way about what went down.
Right, but he does that. I mean, right? He lied about Frederica Wilson. And that's kind of the hallmark of this administration, is to lie about what's right in front of your face. And one of the reasons I think we all know that there have been women pouring into politics. One of the reasons that I think so many women have been truly traumatized by this administration is that they look at these men and they know who they are. That, you know, any woman who's ever dealt with a violent, unhinged man sees these men for what they are. And, you know, and part of that is not just the abuse, not just the anger, but the gaslighting, the constant kind of lying about what's right in front of your face, this weird way that they destabilize you by denying reality.
Donna, do you think that Kelly and McGahn have to go?
Well, I think they do. I mean, I would have thought that Kelly would have to go last week when he disparaged Dreamers, but apparently that wasn't enough either. And, you know, it's not really clear to me that the president is willing to let go of people he thinks are standing out there, you know, sort of protecting his White House and protecting him. And so, you know, do I think he has to go? Yes, I do. Will it matter? No, it won't. I mean, I think that, you know, the president of the United States himself is engaged in this kind of behavior. He's protected this kind of behavior. We have no reason to believe that he won't continue to do the same. And unless it's uncovered, you're safe in the White House.
There's still a lot of explaining that has to come out of this White House. We don't know yet a lot about how all this went down. We have another story. Before we end here, I just want to say Kobe Holderness and Jennifer Willoughby are the names of the two women who were married to Rob Porter. The two women who have shown remarkable strength and courage to come forward, to talk to the FBI, to go public with their stories. And I just don't want to lose sight of them as individuals, as people in amidst this entire maelstrom. We're talking about this now because they took the risk of coming forward. Donna Edwards and Michelle Goldberg, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Much more breaking news tonight. The White House issues a letter saying they will not release the Democratic response to the Devin Nunes memo they released last week. Plus, Rachel Brand's sudden resignation of the Department of Justice, what we know about why she's leaving and what it means for the Mueller probe in 2 minutes. The number 3 official of the Justice Department is out, leaving her post, according to a report in the New York Times, which has now been confirmed by NBC News, in a move that could have far-reaching implications if President Trump decides to escalate his attacks on the Mueller investigation. Rachel Brand, the Associate Attorney General at the Department of Justice since May 2017, will be stepping down after just 9 months in that position to pursue a job in the private sector. Two sources familiar with her plans tell NBC News she found the private sector job irresistible. The chain of command of the Department of Justice and its direct oversight of the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller is now more striking and alarming than ever. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has, of course, recused himself in the Russia investigation, which leaves Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the second in command, overseeing Mueller's team. But if President Trump were to fire Rosenstein, his current Solicitor General, who he appointed, Noel Francisco, would then be the man overseeing Mueller and would have the direct ability to fire him. That could, of course, facilitate the end of Robert Mueller as special counsel. Harry Litman is a former U.S. attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General who worked with Rachel Brand as a clerk for Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. MSNBC Justice analyst Matt Miller is a former chief spokesperson of the Department of Justice under President Obama. Let me start with you, Harry. Knowing Rachel Brand, having been very high up in a political position at the DOJ, what do you make of this?
Well, look, what I don't make of it is that that the Walmart offer was just irresistible and she couldn't say no. I mean, in terms of why she left, there's a sort of divide in Washington between the kind of credentialed conservatives and the of traditional stripe, and then the kind of Trump infidels. She's very much in the first camp, and that correlates with people who would be more likely to resign than to fire Bob Mueller. But for her, there's a lot of reports about how miserable it is to work there. I think that's right, and it's miserable not just day to day there, but in the whole sort of dinner party circuit. The people she goes around town with, they know and think that the president is a repellent figure. She has to sort of defend working for this kind of Mussolini-like guy day in, day out. And then second, if there is to be the sort of bloodletting and bedlam that Trump sometimes threatens, it's a smart move on her part, because better to not even have her fingerprints on it than to have the kind of heroic move of resigning. If she's out of it, it just means that's one less point of controversy, one mark not to discuss when the next job comes around. Those, I think, are the two big points, and the magic allure of Walmart General Counsel is, I think, the least of it.
That seems a very plausible scenario that you painted. I should say Eliana Johnson, who's a very good White House reporter for Politico, said the White House and this admin are in a state of crisis. this. Rachel Brand, number 3 of DOJ, is leaving per somebody close to her, an admin, because she is very smart, accomplished, and talented and wants to protect her career. She's going to Walmart, this source says. Matt, what does this do to the way you think about the integrity and independence of the Justice Department?
I think the pressure on the integrity and independence of the department is one of the reasons Rachel Brand is probably leaving. I think Harry has it right. It's a miserable place to work right now. But often if you're the associate AG, you would stick around because you want the opportunity to either become the deputy attorney general or the attorney general. And let's face it, those aren't great jobs to aspire to right now, because you know if you take one of those jobs, at some point the president is going to ask you to do something inappropriate, something unethical, maybe even something illegal. And so why would you want that job? I think Harry has it right that she found an escape hatch to get out of the department. I think the big question now is what it means for the future of the Mueller investigation. Look, as long as Rod Rosenstein stays in his job, it means nothing. But if he were to recuse himself, if he were to find himself having to recuse, which is a very real possibility, I think a lot of the longtime DOJ veterans and DOJ watchers like myself are puzzled that he hasn't recused himself yet, given his role in the Comey firing. If he ever does, the supervision of that investigation will fall to the person in this job. And so at some point we'll have a nominee for this job, and the Senate will get to ask hard questions about this person and presumably extract pledges not to meddle with Mueller. But in the meantime, that job can be filled by an acting official. Could be a U.S. attorney, could be someone else. It could be someone like Scott Pruitt. And in that case, you have to really wonder what happens if Rosenstein ever takes himself out of the line of fire.
That is a great point, because they have used the Vacancies Act extremely aggressively. This administration has been pushing actings in every conceivable direction. They've sort of been pushing the envelope about how long you can have people in Senate-confirmed positions without Senate confirmation as actings. And you're right that the Vacancies Acts allow anyone who's already been Senate-confirmed to be put in that position. Right now, it's Noel Francisco, who's a Solicitor General. My question to you, Harry, is I saw a lot of people react to Rachel Brand's departure, as upset, because they felt that she was a figure of integrity, that she had trust and reputation, and that this meant that in some ways the pressure the president is putting on DOJ is working. Is that your takeaway?
I think so. She's a stalwart. She's a total pro, and she's an anchor within the department. There are a few others, but she's certainly one for those people who want to actually have the traditional DOJ mission of the rule of law. I thought immediately back when we got her the news to the video from a week ago, where Sessions is, unctuously showering her and Rosenstein with praise, and she seems on stage to be a little uncomfortable. Maybe she's a good Midwesterner, but part of her, I think, is thinking, I'm out of here in a week.
Well, if she announced now, I want to actually, hold on a second, I want to play that and get your response to that, Matt.
Yeah, okay.
And thank you, Rachel, for your kind words, and more importantly, for your strong leadership as our third in command of the department. Those two, Rod and Rachel, are Harvard graduates. They are experienced lawyers. Rachel's had a number of years in the department previously, and so they both represent the kind of quality and leadership that we want in the department.
The picture's worth 1,000 words, the facial expressions of the number 2 and number 3 Justice Department, Matt.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, they're sitting there wondering, what is he talking about? It is a not very well-kept secret around Washington that people in the department, and this includes Republican political appointees, do not like working for Jeff Sessions. And it's for a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is, he's just failed to lead this department. He's failed to stand up and defend the department. You never see him talk about the career officials and their work the way that he talked about Rachel Brand and Rod Rosenstein in that clip. And so I think you see her, finding just a graceful way to exit this place that just hasn't been any fun for anyone over the last year, and in her case, only, over the last only 9 months.
And we're going to find out real soon who that replacement is, and that is a very, very important thing to watch. Harry Litman and Matt Miller, thank you both.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. All right, coming up, the other breaking news tonight. President Trump is blocking that Democratic response to the Nunes memo. More on that ahead. The Porter scandal has revealed some serious security issues for the Trump administration. According to the Washington Post, White House counsel Don McGahn knew about Rob Porter's domestic abuse allegations for a year and did nothing. Quote, in January 2017, when McGahn learned of the allegations, he wanted Porter to stay, because he saw the Harvard law-trained Capitol Hill veteran as a steadying professional voice in the White House. His view didn't change in June when the FBI flagged some of its findings to the White House, nor did he act in September when he learned that the domestic violence claims were delaying Porter's security clearance, or in November when Porter's former girlfriend contacted him about the allegations, according to these people. Throughout all that, Staff Secretary Rob Porter was still allowed to keep his position, handling some of the most sensitive information that made its way to the president's desk. In fact, handling all of the papers that made their way to the president's desk. And he was doing this for a full year without ever being granted a permanent security clearance. And that's just a half of it. Washington Post reported last night that dozens of White House employees are awaiting permanent security clearances, while CNN says that 30 to 40 White House officials and administration political appointees are still operating without full security clearances. One of those aides, according to both reports, of course, is the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And Politico reports that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly was told several weeks ago that the FBI would recommend denying full security clearances to multiple White House aides who had been working in the West Wing on interim security clearances, including Rob Porter. How is it possible that so many people without full security clearance are working at the White House? Washington Post provided a potential answer in a story that broke within the last hour. Those in White House counsel Don McGahn's office, people familiar with the matter said, feel they cannot take action on other people whose background checks have dragged on because they did not take similar steps with Kushner. Yet more big breaking news tonight. The president announcing within the last hour he will not be declassifying a Democratic House intelligence memo that was drafted to rebut a Republican memo claiming the FBI improperly obtained an order to wiretap a former Trump official, of course, after he left the campaign. White House counsel Don McGahn writing a letter that cites concerns from the FBI and DOJ and reads in part, quote, although the president is inclined to declassify the February 5th memorandum because the memorandum contains numerous properly classified and especially sensitive passages, he is unable to do so at this time. With me now, Natasha Bertrand, staff writer at The Atlantic, Ned Price, MSNBC national security contributor, former special assistant to President Obama and former spokesperson and senior director of the National Security Council. Natasha, are you surprised by this?
Not particularly. I'm surprised that the Trump administration would take this kind of reputational risk and do something so completely obvious. I mean, you had the DOJ come out with a letter that essentially said that the FBI and the DOJ had grave concerns, and the FBI came out with its own statement saying they had grave concerns about the release of the Nunes memo and its potential impact, adverse impact on U.S. national security. Devin Nunes did not even show his memo to the FBI and the DOJ before he gave it to the White House. So there was absolutely no vetting by the DOJ and the FBI of the Nunes memo, and Trump essentially declassified it immediately and was saying a day later that it vindicated him. But now when it comes to the Democrats' rebuttal, which of course was written by Adam Schiff, and Adam Schiff is the one who has actually seen the underlying FISA application that these memos are based on. Nunes has not seen that material. Trump all of a sudden is very concerned about the impact that it could have on national security, and he's all of a sudden very concerned with the DOJ and the FBI's input into this, whereas he clearly was not when it came to the Republicans' memo.
Ned, the argument that I've seen from Republicans is that this is a longer memo. John Kelly say, well, it's 10 pages. It goes into a lot more detail. I've even seen some sort of speculation that the Democrats have played the sophisticated game in which they've laid a trap by writing a memo that couldn't possibly be declassified, thereby cornering the White House into having to block it. What do you make of that?
With no offense to Adam Schiff, I think that may be giving the Democrats a little too much credit here. I think the blame lies with the White House, not the credit going to the Democrats for some strategy that may be too clever by half. But I think Natasha's exactly right. This is absolutely a study in contrast. The president, even before he saw the Republican memo, was 100% certain that he would declassify it. And when he did, not a single word was redacted, Chris. And when you read Don McGahn's cover letter, he even states in there that the FBI and DOJ, the same entities that had vociferous warnings about the implications of releasing the Republican memo, that it deemed portions of the Democrats' memo to be classified. So the question is, why not offer a redacted version back to the committee if Trump is so committed to having this memo get out? But instead, it was just wholesale denied. And in doing so, Chris, I think what President Trump has done has really weaponized and politicized intelligence. He's trying to use this and use the Republican memo itself as a partisan political cudgel, and that is why he does not want the Democratic memo out.
Well, Natasha, that seems to have been essentially the trajectory of all this since people started tweeting hashtag release the memo out of nowhere a few weeks ago. I mean, this entire thing began as a kind of partisan feint by Nunes. I guess the question is, does this escalate here? What can the House Democrats now do?
Well, it's definitely going to escalate because now people are going to wonder, well, what's in the Democratic memo?
Yeah, I want to read it. I mean, I wanted to be honest, I wanted to read them both. My feeling is, yeah, sure, I would like to read both of them.
Right, exactly. It's kind of going to be like, what's in the Democratic memo that the president doesn't want the public to see? What in it is going to be redacted, and why are we being prevented from examining that information for ourselves? Now, I think it's worth potentially giving the DOJ and the FBI the benefit of the doubt here because, you know, in the letter, Don McGahn did say that the FBI and the DOJ have recommendations to make that they will then send back to the committee, and Democrats will have to review those recommendations and essentially compare them with the recommendations that the FBI and the DOJ have already given them, because remember, the Nunes or the Democratic memo was already provided to the DOJ and the FBI to review for potential redactions. So they're going to have to go over this and see if any kind of political redactions were made by the White House in an effort to conceal something or other, you know, something that the White House perhaps doesn't want to get out. But ultimately, this has become a completely politicized game, and that's just made all the more clear by the fact that the White House is blocking its release tonight.
Ned, as someone who worked at the CIA and then at the NSC, what do you make of what has happened to one of the two main oversight bodies for the intelligence community over in the House Intelligence Committee?
Well, look, Chris, this is not the first time that we've seen partisan squabbles within the intelligence community, but we've never seen the intensity like this before. All comedy has essentially broken down within the House. The Senate seems to be doing much better still, but the House has come to a standstill. And my worry, Chris, is that there will be tremendous implications for Congress's ability to conduct its critical oversight role. I think by releasing the Nunes memo sight unseen, completely unredacted, the intelligence community is going to be a lot more sparing in what it actually provides to the oversight committees, knowing that their information could just go wholesale, be made public. And similarly, I think we're going to see intelligence analysts and intelligence officials think twice or even three times before they do what used to be routine: submit FISA applications, unmask the identity of terrorists and other spies and others. And the implications of that, Chris, are really profound for our national security.
All right, Natasha Bertrand and Ned Price, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, coming up, we now have more details about the latest resignation from the White House over domestic violence. Ones we mentioned at the top of the show tonight. It follows the same pattern as their handling of Rob Porter. That reporting is ahead.
Tomorrow's
Thing one tonight, Infrastructure Week, the theme that became a punchline and symbol of this president's inability to stay anywhere remotely close to on message. Last year, before the first Infrastructure Week event at 11 a.m. on Monday, June 5th, remember back then? Things had already gone off the rails. Shortly after 6 a.m., Trump blew up his administration's legal defense for his travel restrictions, declaring the latest version was still a travel ban, in all caps, in case anyone missed it. By 10 a.m., Trump was calling London's mayor pathetic in the wake of a terror attack happening in that city. Those stories already eclipsed any news on infrastructure, but Trump piled on, taking credit on Tuesday for the decision by Arab nations to cut ties with Qatar, U.S. military partner. By Thursday, James Comey was testifying about Trump's loyalty test and potential obstruction of justice, while Trump responded by accusing him of perjury, all while Pence insisted this is fine.
And folks, it's already been a banner week for infrastructure.
I forgot. Well, Infrastructure Week is back, baby. And there's already one big problem related to infrastructure. That's thing two in 60 seconds.
What about infrastructure? When is that? We're going to do infrastructure very quickly. We've got the plan largely completed, and we'll be filing it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe sooner.
2 or 3 weeks. Donald Trump said his infrastructure plan would be out in 2 or 3 weeks. That was nearly 41 weeks ago. The White House still hasn't released a plan, but now officials claim they really have a plan coming out this Monday. Now, Trump has repeatedly promised $1 trillion of infrastructure spending. There's just one problem. Trump and Republicans have done some serious spending already, especially their $1.5 trillion tax cut plan. And NBC News reports today that Gary Cohn ended a late January discussion with the president, believing he'd finally convinced Trump there's no room in the federal budget for a massive infrastructure spending bill. That can make Trump's long-awaited plan a tougher sell than he thought.
We're going to get infrastructure. Infrastructure is the easiest of all. We're very well on our way, but infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. I could have started with infrastructure. I actually wanted to save the easy one for the one down the road. So we'll be having that done pretty quickly.
One of the leaders of the effort to keep Tyson out of prison is Donald Trump, the casino owner who could lose millions if Tyson is unable to fight at his resorts.
It's my opinion that to a large extent Mike Tyson was railroaded in this case. You have a young woman that was in his room, his hotel room, late in the evening at her own will. You have a young woman who was seen dancing for the beauty contest, dancing with a big smile on her face, looked happy as could be.
Throughout his 40 years in the public eye, Donald Trump has been all over the map on plenty of issues, but he has never wavered when it comes to his views towards women and the men accused of harming them. Remember when journalist Michelle Fields accused Corey Lewandowski of forcefully grabbing her when she tried to ask Trump a question? She even tweeted out a picture of her bruises. Trump wasn't buying it.
How do you know those bruises weren't there before? I'm not a lawyer, but she said she had a bruise in her arm. I mean, to me, you know, if you're going to get squeezed, wouldn't you think that she would have yelled out a scream or something if she has bruises in her arm?
And there's Trump's response to Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore being credibly accused of sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl and having sexual contact with a 14-year-old.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen. Let me just tell you, Roy Moore denies it. That's all I can say. He denies it. And by the way, he totally denies it.
Trump has bragged about sexual assault on tape. He has been accused of unwanted sexual contact by at least 15 women. And he reportedly told New York Magazine in 1992, when it comes to women, you have to treat them like crap, though that's not the word he used.
I have days where if I come home and, you know, I don't want to sound too much like a chauvinist, but when I come home and dinner's not ready, I go through the roof.
Trump has said he likes to walk in the changing rooms at the beauty pageants while the women were naked. Women to those he considers unattractive.
30's like a perfect age.
Absolutely. She has enough life experience.
Until she's 35.
Too much life experience.
What is it at 35, Howard? It's called checkout time.
This attitude infects the Trump administration. As we discussed earlier, Trump reportedly gave Steve Bannon a cutesy nickname, Bam Bam, based on accusations of domestic violence against him, that he beat up his wife. At this hour tonight, more reporting on the second sudden resignation of a White House official this week amid domestic abuse allegations. And get this, once again, just like the case of Rob Porter, the reporting we have now is that the ex-wife of this staffer told the FBI about the alleged abuse as part of a background check back in the fall. New details on that next. Thing one tonight, Infrastructure Week, the theme that became a punchline and symbol of this president's inability to stay anywhere remotely close to on message. Last year, before the first Infrastructure Week event at 11 a.m. on Monday, June 5th, remember back then? Things had already gone off the rails. Shortly after 6 a.m., Trump blew up his administration's legal defense for his travel restrictions, declaring the latest version was still a travel ban, in all caps, in case anyone missed it. By 10 a.m., Trump was calling London's mayor pathetic in the wake of a terror attack happening in that city. Those stories already eclipsed any news on infrastructure, but Trump piled on, taking credit on Tuesday for the decision by Arab nations to cut ties with Qatar, U.S. military partner. By Thursday, James Comey was testifying about Trump's loyalty test and potential obstruction of justice, while Trump responded by accusing him of perjury, all while Pence insisted this is fine.
And folks, it's already been a banner week for infrastructure.
I forgot. Well, Infrastructure Week is back, baby. And there's already one big problem related to infrastructure. That's thing two in 60 seconds.
What about infrastructure? When is that? We're going to do infrastructure. plan largely completed, and we'll be filing it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe sooner.
2 or 3 weeks. Donald Trump said his infrastructure plan would be out in 2 or 3 weeks. That was nearly 41 weeks ago. The White House still hasn't released a plan, but now officials claim they really have a plan coming out this Monday. Now, Trump has repeatedly promised $1 trillion of infrastructure spending. There's just one problem. Trump and Republicans have done some serious spending already, especially their $1.5 trillion tax cut plan. And NBC News reports today that Gary Cohn ended a late January discussion with the president, believing he'd finally convinced Trump there's no room in the federal budget for a massive infrastructure spending bill. That can make Trump's long-awaited plan a tougher sell than he thought.
We're going to get infrastructure. Infrastructure is the easiest of all. We're very well on our way, but infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. I could have started with infrastructure. I actually wanted to save the easy one for the one down the road. So we'll be having that done pretty quickly.
One of the leaders of the effort to keep Tyson out of prison is Donald Trump, the casino owner who could lose millions if Tyson is unable to fight at his resorts.
It's my opinion that to a large extent Mike Tyson was railroaded in this case. You have a young woman that was in his room, his hotel room, late in the evening at her own will. You have a young woman who was seen dancing for the beauty contest, dancing with a big smile on her face, looked happy as could be.
Throughout his 40 years in the public eye, Donald Trump has been all over the map on plenty of issues, but he has never wavered when it comes to his views towards women and the men accused of harming them. Remember when journalist Michelle Fields accused Corey Lewandowski of forcefully grabbing her when she tried to ask Trump a question? She even tweeted out a picture of her bruises. Trump wasn't buying it.
How do you know those bruises weren't there before? I'm not a lawyer, but she said she had a bruise on her arm. I mean, to me, you know, if you're going to get squeezed, wouldn't you think that she would have yelled out a scream or something if she has bruises on her arm?
And there's Trump's response to Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore being credibly accused of sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl and having sexual contact with a 14-year-old.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen. Let me just tell you, Roy Moore denies it. That's all I can say. He denies it. And by the way, he totally denies it.
Trump has bragged about sexual assault on tape. He has been accused of unwanted sexual contact by at least 15 women. And he reportedly told New York Magazine in 1992, when it comes to women, you have to treat them like crap, though that's not the word he used.
I have days where if I come home and, you know, I don't want to sound too much like a chauvinist, but when I come home and dinner's not ready, I go through the roof.
Trump has said he liked to walk in the changing rooms at beauty pageants while the women were naked. Women to those he considers unattractive.
30's like a perfect age.
Absolutely. She has enough life experience.
Until she's 35.
Too much life experience.
What is it at 35, Howard? It's called checkout time.
This attitude infects the Trump administration. As we discussed earlier, Trump reportedly gave Steve Bannon a cutesy nickname, Bam Bam, based on accusations of domestic violence against him, that he beat up his wife. At this hour tonight, more reporting on the second sudden resignation of a White House official this week amid domestic abuse allegations. And get this, once again, just like the case of Rob Porter, the reporting we have now is that the ex-wife of this staffer told the FBI about the alleged abuse as part of a background check back in the fall. New details on that next.